There is only one thing you need to learn and understand about Magna Carta 1215. It's this. Magna Carta 1215 is the sole peaceful means known to humankind by which the rights of the weakest, most innocent citizens can prevail over a massive, potentially corrupt and oppressive state power. This is the voice of freedom. Magna Carta 1215 Learning Centre. Welcome to your next lesson with hosts Fitzroy and Carl.
Tell you what, folks, you're not going to believe it. We finally have got to lesson number 19. I know, it's all my fault. Very sorry to all of you who've been hanging out for lesson number 19. Not the least of all, my very good mate, Fitzroy Sterling. How are you, buddy?
Good evening, Carl. Good evening, everybody. It's lovely to be back in our regular time slot. It's looking forward to having another crack at lesson 19.
Yeah, well, this time we will get it. I'm absolutely confident. And without further ado, then I guess we should get into it. I will remove my head slightly and we'll bring this one up. So into lesson number 1. Lesson number 19, I beg your pardon, and part number 1. Fitz, a bit of an intro.
Yes, so this is about, obviously, most people can identify problems. That's really easy for the majority of the population to identify a problem. That doesn't take very much nous. But there's three pieces to that puzzle, and until that middle piece is discovered, we're always going to stay at the level of problems. So I guess tonight is just another extension of what we did on lesson 18, where we're taking a look in different aspects of the causal factors of how we got to where we are and the actual way that it seeps into our consciousness without us even knowing it, and we act out our very own slavery, and we're the whole time unbeknownst to it. And because we're unbeknownst to it, no one's going to be able to work it out that we are actually acting out our own slavery. So we're just going to go deeper into taking a look at how that actually happens, how it happens at the cultural level, where people are just totally not even aware. They think it's actually a choice they're making freely from free will, where really it's actually something that's come from a deeper place of really, really insidious control. And because they're not aware of it, they just keep carrying on without thinking about it and just perpetuating their own slavery. And that's the perfect nature of a slavery structure is you need to get the slaves to do the work for you. And so all they've got to do is cultivate the conditions. And so we're going to take a pretty in-depth look at one aspect of that tonight.
All right, the causal factors. Without recognition and acknowledgement of the causal factors that are the source of self-inflicted suffering, one cannot liberate themselves from the invisible prison of social control as prescribed by domination control hierarchy structures.
Yeah, so, obviously that's just another version of what I just said a moment ago. If you can't see your own prison, then you will just remain in it. And the way that the prisons are constructed, especially in the systems we live in here in the, let's call it the West, our prisons are without walls. We don't get to see them. And therefore, we actually are really good prisoners in there. And that's the way it's done. You've got the totalitarian version where they just have the boot on your throat. We've been given the other version where it's like soft control. Yet it's no, when I say soft, it's not in your face, yet it's no less insidious and no less powerful. And so, that's just the introduction into what we're going to launch into tonight.
Okay, next one. Religion, from the Latin verb religere, to tie back, to hold back, to thwart from forward progress, to bind. Religion is a system of control based in unchallenged dogmatic belief, which holds back the progress of consciousness. So
it's just a lot of people when I was growing up, the version of religion I was taught was there's some belief in a deity. This I find is a lot more specific, because religion is not just a belief in a deity, but anything that holds back your capacity to expand and grow, limits your imagination, and actually see truth for what it is, as opposed to what you want it to be. All those things come under the definition of religion, as I've come to understand it now. So I'm hoping that that starts to become obvious as we go through this lesson.
Good slaves. Humans do not make for good slaves, therefore the conditions that transforms autonomous beings into compliant slaves must be manufactured. Once the ego kicks in and attaches to the slavery structure one has invested their life force energy into building, the transformation from autonomy to slavery is complete. The manufactured slave believes themselves in charge of their own decisions, therefore will defend them to the death.
Yep. Again, just an extension of where we started, that if we were meant to be good slaves, right, we would never have feelings like animosity, bitterness, rage, aggression, hostility. Those are all reactions to someone imposing their will upon us. And if we enjoyed that, we'd never have those feelings, right? So we're not inherently designed to be good slaves. So in order for us to become slaves, that needs to be something that's manufactured. It needs to be something that gets into our consciousness, that manipulates our emotions to get us to act out that slavery, and without us being aware of it. And we need to actually turn on each other to do it. And so you look at how much disharmony there is in day-to-day life with the people you interact with. Well, it's because we don't actually operate from that place of knowledge. We come from a place of belief. And when you get people believing different things, that's a really good way to have them disconnected from each other. So these are all manufactured positions. They're not actually inherent in us. And that's what this control structure is all about. It's about manufacturing a belief, getting us to confuse it with a truth, should I say, and then we act on that belief, and then here we are, where we are today.
All good. Self-respect, from the Latin prefix re, meaning again, and the Latin verb spectare, to look at, to take another look at oneself.
Yes, so tonight it's about doing that deep inner reflection, to go into those places that we normally hide from ourselves, to look into those cavities where we've hidden our contradictions, the lies we tell ourselves. We're actually going to try and expose that and see how people react. And it might be confronting. I expect it will be confronting to some people for sure. However, if we don't go into those places, then it's like putting a Band-Aid on the problem. If we don't go in and scoop out that wound, it'll never heal. So, it's a choice that you get to make, how deep you want to investigate and look into your own things you've accepted as truths, and see if you can face it when you can see that it wasn't actually coming from you, that it was manufactured into you.
Yeah, indeed. Anger. Anger is possibly the most motivating emotion, as well as the most conductive to change. Moreover, it also has the hidden virtue of offering valuable information about oneself. Yeah,
so anger is one of those things where it's actually feared by the control structure. They fear anger. And so the way that they've created a perception of anger is that it's something that's problematic. So you'll hear terms like, oh, he's so angry, or, he's an angry man. Like that's something to be feared and dismissed, that there's something defective about you if you display anger. And what's really happened is it's not anger per se that's the issue. It's the expression of it. And we've been trained into expressing anger through like versions of hostility or aggression. So we've got outward aggression, then we've got passive aggression, right? There's two versions of the same thing. And we've been trained to believe that those things are anger when they're actually not. Anger is just an emotion that comes up when your boundaries have been breached. And it's like a red light on the dash that comes up to let you know that there's been an intrusion of some description, and that you need to act in order to restore your integrity. That's pretty much all it is. And so the reason why we're taught anger is bad is because the opposite of anger is docility. So they can't have us actually responding to our anger in a way that's actually in the service of what we seek. So then they make it like anger is problematic, and the only ways that we've learned how to express anger is through aggression and hostility. Therefore, it needs to be managed. But that's not the true expression of anger. That's just a superficial expression. The true expression of anger is really knowing how to actually get to the place you want to get, like to really find that place in yourself, to come up with a strategy, to how to do it. So it's just a warning light to trigger further investigation into how you're going to be creative in your solutions. That's what anger can actually be used for.
Sure. A warning meter for the violations to your integrity that are intolerable, and an indicator of perceived limits. Thus, anger is accepting anger Understanding its message and acting in a balanced way will allow you to improve your reality and promote positive changes. The opposite of anger, as you said, is docility. Now, I need to stop sharing the screen here for 1 second and start sharing it again in a different way. Give me 1 second. Let me remove
So just
that.
while you're doing that, Carl, just pretty much a repeat of what I said a moment ago. That just reinforces it. So the reason why anger has been pushed down, it was something we cannot actually look at and explore, is because you can't get compliant, obedient slaves if they're reacting and they're actually listening to the anger, because it's pointing to something really important. And so if you get them to fear it or think there's something defective about having anger, then they will suppress it, or they will suppress it in others. And if you have a look, we have anger management everywhere. Like there's all different versions of that. It's in the workplace, it's in relationships. You'll find it, in sporting clubs. It's everywhere. It's bad to be angry. So, this is like a really, really important one that has been suppressed for a reason, because if they didn't suppress it, we would be so much harder to control. So, these are very deliberate tactics that have been set in place in order for us to deny those gifts that we were given, to actually make sure that we can find our way as an autonomous being in this realm that we live in.
Okay, and we've got a little clip to play.
Yep. Hopefully it's going to work, and we can have someone else articulate it better than me.
The anger energy, we play, we move it through our system, we embody it, we welcome the anger. Okay, and the anger is often a certain kind of mattering, of valuing something, of reaching for something. It's a boundary. And so we I get it that you're angry. Let's be angry, and we give people ways of being angry, but we don't take it out on people. But in a domination system, those two things get merged. And so what happens is, because so many people instantly convert anger into aggression, we think that anger is bad. And the moment that you inhibit people's anger, you can control them more. And so it's in the interest of a domination system, if they want nice, compliant humans who are obedient, to never be angry and to see anger as only for the privileged.
Huh. Wow.
So, like that sort of gives you a little bit of extra insight into how it gets appropriated.
Because they're the one.
Hang on a sec.
But no one else is allowed to be angry. And it's nothing inherent to white men, by the way. It just, that's the
Gee, now that's interesting. I don't even know where that's coming from now.
And this is the problem.
Oh, that's still the same video going. There's a little bit more to it.
There you go. Do you want to continue with that? Sorry, I thought.
They could. If we could just go to the last part, just to get that last bit. There's obviously a little bit of value in there too.
All right, just let me bring this back up again. I'll just drop it back a bit.
The social structure currently created. We could, and this is the problem with how we do social change. We don't want to just flip sides. We're not going to just take the same system and just change identity factors. Oh, it's not white men, now it's going to be, I don't know, blue whales. It's the same domination structure. You just have someone else on top. It's ridiculous. We want to change the structure, not who's on top. That's not the game we're playing.
So what she's talking about is so you'll hear there's a little bit more to go, but what you'll hear is people say, like, all these different systems that came into place, like communism failed, and socialism failed, and then the French Revolution, that failed, etc. What nobody ever talks about is the actual structure never changed. They had different titles, so the very people who would have fought these revolutions, they never changed their actual mindset. That never changed. The same mindset was still in place, and that's what doesn't actually get explained. So they come in, but they come in with that same domination hierarchy thinking as that they were born into. So then they end up just creating the same structure that's already there, and they do nothing different. So that's what she's talking about. It's about understanding the structure as to how we are dominated, and so it doesn't matter. Like, so what they've done in the past, they've gone, patriarchy. Well, that's one form of structure. Well, the opposite of that is matriarchy. Well, it's still anarchy. Archy means rulership, right? So what does it really matter if it's a male, he's in charge, or a female? It's still a hierarchy structure, oligarchy, patriarchy, matriarchy, oligarchy, monarchy. It doesn't really matter. There's still a rulership system. And so what's being explained here is, if we don't understand the actual way by which control is dished out, we're just going to keep repeating it. So this is, what's on offer here tonight, is to see how it's been done, right? There's never been a change in the power structure. There's just been a change in who's actually on top of it. But the structure is the issue. And until people can understand it and see it for what it is, they'll keep participating in it. And there's very subtle ways people do it without even realizing that they're participating in it. And so hopefully we'll get a bit of that out tonight.
All right. You want to play the end of this?
I think there's a little bit more left too, yeah.
That moves through our systems pretty quickly. The only thing that makes anger stay is judgmental thinking. And we don't want to feed that.
So this is a very important part. Like, we are trained through our language to think in terms of judgments of what people are for what they do. And once we do that, hate gets into our hearts, and then we wish to do what? We wish to punish them or teach them a lesson. And this is a very clever, constructed way of how people become their own slave masters. We end up doing to each other that which we couldn't bear if someone was doing to us. And we're not even aware that we're doing it. So it's a very, very subtle thing, but it's very potent. And, she was really articulating that. So I'm hoping, if you're not understanding it, go back and watch it and re-listen and really have a think about how most people will actually initiate violence, not only upon themselves, but upon others, based on the judgments they make. And you think about the language and the terms and the words that you use on a day-to-day basis, and what happens once you start believing those words are true. And that somebody had to create that language, and there was something very specific as to why they did it. Now, anyone who's done any sort of anthropology and dealt with people from different tribes and that, they'll find that their language is entirely different to the ones we speak. There's an absence of particular kinds of words and ideas that they don't have. So these people can have more horizontal structures because their language supports it, where the languages that we've been taught to speak support a hierarchy structure. And very few of us are even aware that that's in existence. So these are the subtle ways, that the matrix works, and it's humming along, and it's penetrated in the most intimate ways inside our psyche, and very few people are capable of recognizing it.
All right, hierarchy. This is from Hieros equals filled with the divine or holy, and archon equals ruler, from the Greek hierarchia. Is that how you say it? Hierarchia?
Yeah, I think you did it right.
Rule of the high priest, or rank in the sacred order.
So this is from the previous lesson, guys, just a recap, because it's all connected. The last lesson and this one's very connected. So as you can see, the idea, is that a high priest, so you see there's some kind of, what's a priest, right? Someone who's inserted themselves as an intercessory from a deity, so it's something sacred. But these are all mind ideas. And then if you think about monarchs, who were they always surrounded by? They're always surrounded by some religious, figure. So it's not an accident that, these rulership structures were always infiltrated by these people who believe themselves to be intercessories, that they were born to rule on some level, that they have this divine knowledge, and that they've been, chosen by some higher force. So that if you start looking at it, you can see how it's all been playing out. So hopefully that's just drawing some things to your attention that you might have missed in the past. Yet it's quite important to start looking at it like that.
Domination control. Hierarchy structures are concerned with the use of power in two ways: gaining power over other people through punishment and or reward, or the experience of power under where one sabotages from the back end, i.e. passive-aggressive. This polarized state eliminates the capacity for equity through power sharing from collective conscience. Power domination structures tend not to feel safe. Therefore, each individual will experience high levels of shame, guilt, fear, anxiety, and anger, escalating an emphasis on meeting needs for safety, predictability, and structure.
Yeah, so there's quite a lot there actually to really sink your teeth into. So we in the West live under what's called a power over system, where people are using their power over us, and we are constantly doing it to one another. We use domination control tactics, and one of them is punishment, and the other one is reward. Now, out of the two, reward is the more insidious one. We're going to get into that later because it's done because you actually believe that that's something you want, where really it's something you're controlled by without you even being aware of it. And then you've got the other end, which is power under. So if you're feeling like you don't have power to be able to dominate somebody else, then what you do is you sabotage from the back end, which is that passive aggressive energy. All right. And so we've got two options. We've got the overt domination and we've got this subversive one. But they're both ways of trying to wrestle control. And there's the two polarized states we operate from. Most people, without realizing it, are doing one or the other, or sometimes both. And that's the real sad part. If you think about, our divine capacity for really elevating into a higher order of consciousness, this is how these systems make sure we stay down into that dense energy where we're, in this constant power struggle with one another. And so we never see each other as equals. There's always something defective about someone else or something defective about us. We're always seeing things in that polarized way. Now, that's not because we're created that way. That's because that's a belief system that we've adopted based on the system that we live in. That's made sure that we will only see that way of existence. And it gets into us in the very most subtlest ways. You have a look at the way the language is constructed. You have a look at the way you're taught at school of how to behave. Like I remember seeing at school this thing that was on the wall. It really got my attention. It's like if you do it once, you're rude. Like that's a massive judgment right there. If you do it twice, you're mean. If you do it more than that, you're a bully, right? So three massively, huge judgments about how defective someone is. And when you hear the word bully, what's the first thing that you think of? You think that something's the matter with them. They need to be corrected, that, some form of punishment needs to be given to them or reward. Like they're the first things that come up to your mind, right? And these are ways to make sure that we're always in that divided state, that we're always fractured, we're never united. There's a very subtle ways, and most people argue to the death. They say, no, look at him, they're a full bully. But what they don't do is they don't go and investigate, well, if someone gets into that space where they're actually, terrorizing someone else, and let's say it's a child, right? What must have happened in their life, for them to get to that stage? Is there any real look into that? What about the conditions that they lived under? What about the conditions that we all live under? What about all the subtle ways we bully each other all the time without us even being aware of it, right? As soon as we start using reward and punishment, that's a type of bullying if you really want to be specific about it, right? Because we're trying to coerce behavior from somebody else. It's just done subtly. So then we start having different levels of what we call is a bully versus to all the subtle ways. But if you go to school, that's happening constantly by the whole system. It's done like that, right? You have a look at the way it's all regimented, that you can only, focus your attention on something for this amount of time until the bell rings. I remember hearing this joke that I thought was really funny, where the guy says, I remember learning at school about, Pavlov's dogs thinking, stupid animals. And then the bell rang and we all had lunch, right? That one I thought was really well put, right? So here we are, we're looking at other people and other creatures thinking how silly they are, and we're not even thinking about, well, how we're controlled, right? We march to these bells that ring. We're taught from a very early age, just to jump to this noise. And that's what that means. And it's so common and prevalent in our lives, we don't even think about it.
Absolutely. In domination and control, we employ routines, rituals, rules, policies, codes, etc. as strategies to meeting the needs for safety and predictability. Knowing right from wrong becomes a critical strategy to safety that the populace becomes desperate to attain. In this state, the populace is primed to willingly give up sovereignty to perceived authority figures in return for safety.
Yeah, so if you think about it, right, if we are not acting from a place where we're using our divine understanding of, inherent truths that exist in nature, if we're living outside of that, then some kind of set of rules needs to be set up, because these are unnatural things. And that's where codes and strategies and things like that, and rituals, policies, that's where they come in. If we were living a moral existence, we wouldn't require this. We'd all just know what's acceptable and what's not. That's why we have a conscience, right? And the moral man will always live in the moment, right? They're not pre-planning anything. The immoral man will always come up with these codes and rituals and policies, because then they get to shape it, and then they get to work their way through it while others have to stick to it. See, this is the real subtle mind trick. And this is how we get people like police and courts and government employees to actually keep quoting from legislation, because to them, they're taught that they can be safe as long as they stick to this, right? And so they go through these rituals, routines, and rules and policies and stuff, and say, well, that's policy. It doesn't matter what I think. They'll say that. This is not about my opinion. This is what the policy is, right? So what they're saying is they're obfuscating their actual moral responsibility for their duty, right? So this is another mind trick, subtle mind trick of how this is done. And so, once you don't have that level of safety through the fact that we're all operating from morality, then we're looking for predictability. And what gives us predictability? These rules, policies, procedures, right? And so then that's how we're left to someone else's definition of what is right and wrong then. That's the mind trick, right? It's not universal anymore. It's not objective. It's someone's opinion who's self-elected as your ruler that actually ends up being what is right and what is wrong. They define it for you. And then guess what? They get to change it when they decide, and that's what's been happening right under our noses.
Absolutely. And they continue to change on almost a daily basis. At this juncture, moral relativism, the second tenet of Satanism, is brought into reality. Right and wrong are no longer objective truths, but now defined by the perceived authority, the very people that manufactured the conditions that led to the surrender of autonomy. These are the conditions that turn sentient beings with eternal souls, into armies of order followers, operating from the us versus them mindset that fractures, divides, and polarizes people and their mortal enemies, or into mortal enemies.
Yeah, so once policy, procedure, and that becomes the order of the day, then, like I said, somebody gets the right to decide what is right and what is wrong. And as soon as once that leaves the collective conscience from a place where we all can witness, what's objective truth, once that exits, right, then someone else has to fill that vacuum. And that's why it's done that way. Like we need to have somebody fill it. And when they fill that vacuum, they get to decide what that is and define it for you. And then if you adhere to it and you hold to it, then you're perceived and you're rewarded as being a good person, right? And if you do not, if you buck up against it, then there's something bad about you. You're defective. Therefore, some corrective action is justified to be dished out against you. This is a really, really clever mind trick that's been played on us for thousands of years. And so how else are you going to get people to follow orders that are out of alignment with what they truly know in their hearts is what is going to actually be part of what people need to live in peace and harmonious coexistence? Well, they have to fear, being told that they're bad. They have to fear not getting a reward. This is how you get them to fracture and divide. And that's how we polarize and we become mortal enemies. And these are very subtle ways, but they're very effective.
Truth is not always beautiful, nor beautiful words the truth. That is a very wise saying.
Yeah, so I really like that one because, I don't know, I reckon it just says everything, right? So truth isn't what you want to hear, and sometimes it ain't going to sound pretty either, Yet it's what it is, and it's if you've attached to your beliefs as truths, then truth is going to sound very ugly to you. If you're not attached, if you're capable of being influenced by that which you don't understand but are willing to learn, then it might actually seem beautiful to you. It all comes down to your willingness to actually accept, the unacceptable. And for most of us, and I'll use the population that are jabbed, for example, they will not want to actually accept that which is just too far for their consciousness to want to grab onto in the moment, because that's just too overloading for them. Their organisms couldn't handle it because they've swallowed that lie so deeply that there's no real strength inside them to actually go and question it. Because to do that would be like certain death. That's how it would feel for them.
Can I make a statement on that would give
Yeah, go for it.
people the feeling of exactly what you've said?
Yeah, go nuts.
The world is flat. That's one of those sentences that stops people dead, because it's very difficult to comprehend or believe that the earth might be flat. Now, I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying that statement polarizes people. And I think it's a great example of what you've just said, that people are polarized by certain comments on things, and they're not willing to accept any story or in fact proof, if there were some, to support that. Am I on the right
Yeah, like I mean,
stretch there?
it's yeah. So it's once it doesn't fit in with the confines of what's an individual has come to. I call it a survival story. We all create one of those, and when you create a survival story, you attach to that deeply. Your emotions, everything's invested in that because your actions are serving that survival story. And so that's when the ego kicks in and it just hangs on to it for dear life, and it just will not relent and let go. That's why they say that it's easier to fool people than to convince them they're being fooled, because the ego is attached for all the effort, time, energy it's invested in acting out the lie. And so it's not interested in actually being shown that it has swallowed a lie. It's just not interested. So yeah, it's one of those things that, that's what shuts off that intuitive capacity for actually leading with curiosity, is when you swallow a lie and you've attached to it.
This one's going to raise some comments. Competitive sport and fear. The containment arena that gives permission and license for beings full of self-loathing, guilt, fear, anxiety, and repressed anger. A safe place to release the tension built up from living a life of denying life-serving needs.
Yeah, there's a mouthful there, isn't it?
So I want to translate that. You're saying that AFL footballers and NRL footballers are full of self-loathing, guilt, fear, anxiety, and repressed anger. Look, there's a few of those that I would certainly agree with. I'm interested to hear your explanation, because we've touched on competitive sport once before and we got a huge reaction to it. So let's see where this goes.
Well, like, remember the introduction of the show? Remember I said this is going to be really confronting. This is stuff that people have bought into. They act it out in every aspect of their lives. Like, I didn't say it was going to be easy. I said it was going to be really full tilt, hard. So that's why I did do the prep, just so I could, let you know that something unpleasant's coming. So how do you get people to actually enjoy violence against each other? How can that happen?
Well,
because those sports are violent. There's no dancing around it.
I would argue.
You think about it.
I would argue that today's sport is progressively more non-violent. I would argue that AFL and the NRL in their day were extremely violent and certainly a blood sport. If back in the 70s, particularly with the AFL, I don't know about the NRL because I wasn't watching it, but having played sport, having been part of a team, you are not educated to be violent. In fact, you're taught the opposite. You are taught team membership, team comradeship, working for the team, working with the team. It isn't about going out and beating the crap out of the opposition or feeling guilt about going out on it or being scared of being beaten by the opposition, either physically or, well, I suppose there's more of a fear of being beaten on the ground rather than there is beaten in person. So I would argue that sport has been used to help young people learn. I'm not discounting what you're saying, but the tenets that they use in sport are fair play generally. Be a good sport. Don't lose your temper. Don't start a fight, because there is immediate consequence to that if you are playing even in a junior league all the way through to the most senior of leagues, the most professional of leagues. And particularly the violence in the two sports that we've already mentioned have been sanitized almost to a point where we're playing touch football these days. So I'm not convinced that what you're saying is 100% correct,
Well,
because I
Carl,
would agree.
hang on, Carl, because we're going to do a lot more into it. So just hold your horses.
Oh, okay.
This
I'm
is
getting
this
ahead.
is just the
Righto.
this is just the beginning.
Righto.
So just hold in mind how you've defined violence, because violence is way more deeper than what you've just defined it at. You've just defined it in the obvious sense, right? There's a lot more to violence than just punching somebody. You know, there's that whole, how do you respect someone's bodily autonomy if you're going to run full tilt and throw yourself at them? How is that respecting someone's bodily autonomy, right? The whole sport of football and NRL is all about throwing and lunging at somebody, you know, throwing them to the ground, stacks on. You know, these guys cop serious injuries. Like, why would we want that for each other, right? If our bodies are meant to be temples, why would we put ourselves into an arena where we're hurting each
cop
other?
the same serious injury you'd get in a football match changing a car tire. You don't have to be hit by another human being running in the opposite direction to do it.
But that's not what I'm saying, Carl. I'm saying that that's actually the purpose of that sport. That's its design.
Well, no, the purpose of the sport is to kick the bit of dead pig through the big sticks at the end of the ground.
Well, then why is it acceptable to throw each other around in order to do it?
Because
why is it acceptable to run at each other and hurl ourselves? Is that the highest order of consciousness that we can aspire to? Is it? Is that our creativity?
Ever met a rugby league player?
Yes. And how intelligent
That's probably
are they?
about the highest they can aspire to, some of them.
There's a reason why they're held in high esteem, right? Why? Why are they held in high esteem? Why is there a whole ritual around the game before it starts? You know, these are all parts of how people get sucked into it. This is what I said to you, Carl. It wasn't going to be easy.
No,
I did make it clear.
I understand what you're saying.
We're going to go into this.
I'm trying to put up the devil's side of the argument, where your definition of sport is very different to mine, clearly. And
well, I'm talking about what's your reality.
I don't consider the players throwing themselves at each other or piling on. They may have 30 or 40 years ago, but that isn't the case today. Not in junior sport, not in mid-level sport, and certainly not in professional sport. You don't see that happen in basketball or non-contact sports, although
they do. They run into it. They run into each other.
Yeah, but it's more accidental, and if you do touch them, it's a punishment. You see, yes. you get the ball taken off you.
However, Carl, the object of the game, right, is to win. Winning is a form of violence because someone has to be violated in order for someone to win. So it goes beyond just physical.
I would argue that in science, then the exact same happens. You might have 2, 3, 10 different scientific teams working on a
exactly.
Problem.
Yes, I agree.
So
that doesn't make it okay. That's the same mentality, you see, because it's cut across every aspect of society, and because it's cut across every aspect of society, we believe that's just normal. We don't understand that's actually being manufactured. And here's the best part: we did it to ourselves because we bought the idea that there's a superior and inferior. That had to be implanted in our minds first. So how did that get there? And then we started creating these activities.
I'm talking about 10 scientific groups, not superior or inferior. The person who or the group that does the most research gets the best results is in fact the winner. And the people, you like, are the winners because of that scientific development.
No, Carl, we don't need to compete with each other to find a way to advance humanity. That's not a necessity. That's a mind trick. You know, why is it acceptable for one to fail?
I'm not suggesting society that they are directly
hang on a sec, Carl, let me finish. Carl, just let me finish. Why is it acceptable for failure to be something that we admire? Like if you fail, that means you're not good enough, right? Instead of one man's failure is everyone's failure. Where's that ever penetrated in people's consciousness, right? So then we reinforce it. We reinforce it. Well, this is wonderful because we're getting cognitive dissonance right now. We reinforce it with every aspect of society. And see, because you've bought into it, because what you did is you had the experience, you had the community building, but that's all part of it. Because you'll see later with the slides, that's been set up on purpose. You can only have community building within the team.
Get to it and prove it to me because I'm just about ready to tear your argument in half.
Yeah, well,
Shame.
go for it.
Self-loathing is a premeditated tactic to internally fragment and fracture one's integrity in order to disintegrate from oneself for the purpose of disidentifying with others. Self-loathing triggers one to deny life-serving needs endowed them to advance the quality of all life. Quality of life is achieved by meeting needs for choice and sharing in the abundance of resources, both external and internal, provided by life on this planet. The natural consequence of denying one's needs is to deny those very same needs in others by punishing others for expressing the needs one denies themselves.
So you can think about someone who might cry, like, say, let's say you see a boy who cries. Now, if you were admonished for crying when you were little, what are the chances you're going to be sympathetic or empathic to seeing another child cry, right? If you were told that that's something bad or wrong with you, right? And so then you're told that that's something that's unacceptable, that you're weak, right? Now have a look at sport, right? Where are men allowed to cry? When they lose a game. Where are they allowed to touch each other? On the field. If they do that anywhere else, what happens? Straight away, they're shamed. But here, it's acceptable. This is the nature by how sport manipulates men, right?
Mate, I've been walking around meeting people for the last 6 months, and there isn't a man I meet who is at all shy about hugging me or being hugged back. So I think you are speaking in blanket terms. You are speaking in very broad blanket terms.
So, Carl,
and I don't think that's correct.
I'd like to address that one. They're hugging you because they identify with what you're doing that's going to be in the service of what they need.
So what's the difference between two footballers hugging each other after they kick a goal?
Well, do they do it when they're just at training? Do they do it when they're like down the street?
Yes, they
chatting
do.
With each other? Do they really?
Yes,
I've never seen it. You know what I mean?
Well, go to a football
and it's only,
session,
hang on a sec, Carl. Hang on, hold it. It's only because they see themselves as being part of something where they're separate to someone else, right? There has to be an opposition in order for them to actually have that connection with one another. So that's when you're getting hugged in the street, it's people who have an identification with you. The normie that sees you as a tinfoil hat wearer is never going to come up and hug you. Actually, they're going to pour shame on you.
Well, they can try.
But I'm saying that's what they're going to. That's what their intention is. You see, that's a fragmentation. We have an us and a them mentality, and sport perpetuates that.
Denial, the willful refusal of objective truth. One who lives in denial of their needs is controlled by the very needs they deny. For example, one who denies their needs for tenderness will seek to dismiss, admonish, or punish others expressing those very same needs.
So I just want to look at this comment that says us bikers hug each other. So that was a perfect reinforcement of what I'm saying. Is once there's an identification with someone else that they're like you, then you'll hug them for sure. But as soon as you see them as different or something's not right with them, it goes the other way. We want to punish them, right? And so this is that thing. This is how we divide people. We get them into us and them states. Like the previous
So why do the opposition players on a team at the end of the game shake hands and hug each other?
Because that's what they're taught is sportsmanlike, right? They're taught that that's part of the code. You know, sport code. Remember we just spoke about codes a moment ago? Mm-hmm. It's part of the code, right? So that's what they're taught to show that there's no hard feelings. But we can tear each other apart. We can bleed. We can bust each other up. That's all fine. But at the end, we'll shake hands. I mean, you think of the absurdity of that. That's absolutely absurd, right? We're not here to be each other's punching bags. Yeah, as soon as we call it sport, and right, and what's the mood like in the stadium when people come and watch this stuff? Are they really looking at each other as someone else is a sentient being, or is there like the other team and what do they say about each other, right? What are the things they're hurling? Are they wishing well on them when they're screaming at each other? You know, when the fans and that, and it's like, look at us, you have a look at what happens in World Cup soccer. It's look at us, we're the best, you know. We are the champions. What's it saying that song? But you're talking about
soccer, mate. You're talking about soccer. It's a crazy game. You can play 90 minutes and not get a result. Of course, the fans are going to go outside and get a result.
Carl, it's not relevant. The point is there's an us and them mentality in the whole thing, right? So it doesn't matter what code you talk about. It's still us and them. And it's, no time for losers because we are the champions, right? How often do you hear that song? Right? So this is about we're better than someone else. This is the whole idea. And only then when we're better and we're more superior, The winners are the superior. They've got to prove it again that they are superior by winning again. And when you start getting that mentality into people, they don't know how to be actually in connection with one another. They see life as a polarized experience. It's fragmented. And sport does it really well. That's why they spend so much time on it. Have you ever asked yourself how much time and energy sport gets? It gets a massive amount. Like how much of the
but I would
news is
argue
taken
it's
up
for
by
a
sport.
different reason. I mean, it's probably verging on similar to what you're saying, but we get sport because give them bread and circuses. It's that simple.
Yes, but if it wasn't pushing a message, Carl, they wouldn't have it. Just like voting.
Oh,
if
it
voting
is
changed
definitely
anything,
pushing an ulterior message.
So what's happening at sport, right, is while everyone's out there like thinking they're having a great old time and being controlled, the people who are controlling them are meeting in those same venues of how they're going to control them more. This is the absurdity of what's happening, but they're so distracted by, my team, represents me and all this kind of stuff that they've invented that somehow they're now living that life of their warriors out there in the field hurting each other. Like they get, that's the only way you can get exhilaration is to see each other throwing each other themselves. Like we've not evolved from the Colosseum. It's no different. And if life's about evolution, why are we doing exactly the same thing, just in a different manner? Where's the evolutionary state there?
This time around, I suppose we have evolved a little bit.
We're actually killing each other en masse, actually, Carl. Have you not noticed?
I don't see it happening on the football fields, no.
No, you haven't seen all those guys dropping?
I see a lot of people falling over, dying of heart attack on sporting grounds.
Yes, so this is what I'm saying. Like we're killing each other in different ways.
That's not because of what they're doing on the footy ground, mate.
No, what I'm saying is that mentality of us and them, right? The same mentality as to why we've been pushed off the cliff, because there's a superior class who's an us and everyone else is a them. It's the same thinking. You cannot fix a problem with the same thinking that created it. So everyone who believes they actually want to live in a new world, if they don't understand how they're being controlled, they're going to stay in the old world.
All right. Reward releases the neurotransmitter dopamine. Mind states associated with dopamine are confidence, motivation, goal orientation, trust, and reliance on perceptions, energy, courage, appropriate risk-taking, sociability, and self-assertiveness.
So what happens to people when they win? What do they get? They get a reward, right? So why do they want to do it again? Because this is a brilliant way to get them to want it. Because once your dopamine levels get released, you've got no control anymore. You're just craving it. These are the really subtle ways that it's happening. And so when your team wins, then you win, right? So then you get the reward and you get to feel superior. You get to feel that you've shared in it. You've rallied around, you've been with the team, you've seen them suffer. They didn't do so well last year and they slowly built themselves up and, the whole story. And then what? It just keeps repeating. We've always got to constantly have a new winner. Maybe that's the same winner, but someone's got to lose. And then how often do you find cheating happens? Why do people want to cheat? These are all questions as to why do we get into these states where we're willing to do the unthinkable? Because we're craving that reward.
People don't cheat to win; they cheat to get money, mostly.
And so, what is money? Is money not a reward?
Oh yeah, I'd agree.
So, what's the difference? Just a different mechanism. Same strategy, different mechanism.
True. Reward is a dependency on safety, validation of purpose, and self-worth are also triggered from dopamine releases. Reward switches one's internal ability to generate self-worth to a dependency on perceived external authority. External reward teaches one to buy love through learned behaviors that will gain praise, approval, and compliments.
So when we tell our children that, if they don't do what we want, they won't get this reward, right? We're teaching them how to be really good slaves. Or if they do what we want, they'll get this reward or they'll get punished. They've got two choices. Right? So we're never allowing them to actually come to that place within themselves when they can find who they are from their innate will to want to contribute to the well-being of someone else without there being some kind of dopamine release based on someone else's approval. Right? So when we start giving out rewards and punishment, we're creating that structure, and that's changing their brain chemistry. And that starts very early on from day one. We're doing it to our own children without even knowing it. And so this is a very subtle way. And sport just repeats that, right? Because what happens when you win, right? People say, oh, it's okay. It doesn't matter how you whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. Well, then why are you even playing a game where there's win or lose in it? That makes no sense. That's a total contradiction. So you've got to get people acting in contradiction to what they're really wanting in order for them to be good slaves. You know, just like we say we want to share, right? We teach our kids to share, but then we put them in systems where they're actually pitted against each other. Now that's an outright contradiction. You know, so we're not even living the whole values we espouse to say that we want to live by. We don't even know how to do it. You know, we're actively participating and contributing to our own agony without even being aware of it. And we're teaching our children from day one, just like we were taught, just like our parents were taught, etc. And because we know no other way, there's no sliding door that you can step into to see an alternative reality, then that's the limits of our understanding of how life can be. And so if you don't actually use your imagination, right, then you'll never think that there could be another way to be. So what happens? People start arguing like you were a moment ago. Like, well, hang on a sec, I don't agree. Because the imagination has been shut off. Because what's happening? You're getting rewarded. So then you're getting comfortable. And so you don't want to use your imagination because everything you require is being done for you. Someone else has set your understanding of how to get your needs for exhilaration met. Someone else has set your understanding of how to get your needs for connection and community met. It has to be within a little club or a little gang that only they amongst themselves can be trustworthy. Anyone outside of that bubble, you don't trust them.
Mate. No, I'm sorry. This is starting to sound like you were left out of the little club and the little gang when Little League was playing, and you were that age. A lot of what you're saying is not resonating at all.
So it doesn't need to resonate just with you, Carl. Like there's other people listening, so maybe they might have a different opinion.
Yeah. I think
but just that attack just right there, this is starting to sound like. See, he just went in straight into a judgment.
You're using some very interesting words. Attack being one of them. I'm not attacking you.
Yeah. So when you said this is starting to sound like you were left out, so you're casting an aspersion now. Do you know what I mean? You don't have no evidence.
Well, you've been casting aspersions for the last 20 minutes at me.
No, I haven't. So, this is all evidence based.
You know,
this is all evidence based.
Yeah. All right. Let's have a look.
So now it's pushed. So my friend, it's actually pushing on your buttons that the things that you've accepted as true.
No, I'm tired and I'm just about at the end of it. So let's just go.
So have a look at that. Look what happens. His knee goes right into the back of his head. And now he's launched face down. Right on his back. There you go. Back of the head again. Look at the way they land on top of each other. They're all different forms of violence. Right at the back of the head, there it goes. Knee to the back of the head.
He's actually on his shoulder, but yeah.
Yeah, if you slow it down, you see his head juts forward. See that? Another picture.
Looks like the only bloke on the ground there is the bloke who wound up with the ball.
So these are things that people don't look at. If you slow it down, you can see the contact. You know, they're launching themselves right up at someone's head, right on their spine. Really delicate parts of the body. Look at that. If you look at his face, he doesn't look that happy. He runs on the ground. So that's us denying our needs, right? No one likes having someone's knee in the back of their head.
I think I'm going to spend this whole week digging up a whole heap of film clips of soccer players falling over without being hit.
It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. See, it's not about that. It's about the enjoyment of violence.
No, that'd be about the cheating part, I was thinking.
But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the enjoyment of violence. The cheating is the second one. So you have a look at
personally would have chosen a bit of video of Stan Magro cleaning up Alex Jezelenko on the wing some years ago.
You see, that's that deserving. You know, someone deserves to be hurt, and we get off on it.
No, I was just saying that's a much better picture of violence on a football field than what you're showing at the moment.
It's about actually understanding how this is glorified. This is the highest aspiration. So he said he's Pollack's the teammate. So people who don't understand what this has got to do with the 12-15 MC. So
is that it?
So yeah, it should be the question is what's this got to do with the 12-15 MC? Because everything's about control. First, you have to understand how you're controlled before you can understand how to get out of control. Now, the 12-15 MC, it has 4 tenets: no loss, no harm. When I look at that, I see loss and harm. The people don't actually extend past what they think. Just it's about we're just about being that government can commit violence against us. No, we're committing violence against ourselves. So if we want to be honourable in a system of no loss and harm, why would we do that to each other? Why is it okay to go into an arena and make that a special place where that's all right, and that doesn't affect us? You know, it's because it's in the confines of an arena. What do you think you're not going to take that mentality out with you? You know, how many brawls happen after football? You know, where does all that aggression and that get taken? You know, that's a place where we're actively encouraging aggression. And we don't even think about it. We think that that's wonderful because what? We can trust each other. Well, within the team, we have trust, we have integrity, we have dignity, we have consideration, cooperation. So we can meet our needs in amongst that team. But as soon as we're outside of that team, someone's outside of that, you know, what we call the us and the them, well, they get the other side. We get to perpetuate violence in them. That's okay. So then we're splitting. We're saying that some people are worth dignity, honesty, and others are not. Sport pushes that idea. And it perpetuates it and it makes it okay. Like that's the highest form of aspiration that we can ever ascend to. How are we ever going to go into a place where we're all part of the same human family while we're still engaging in this? How's that possible? This is what's holding back our consciousness. That's why I put the thing up about a religion. It's what it actually, prevents consciousness from expanding because we are participating in this ritual every single day. That's all we're being seen. And what's our economy based on? Same thing, winning or losing. You know, it's not like we say, well, if one business collapses, we all collapse. So we all make sure that there's a way that everyone can, thrive in this society. No, you have to be better. You have to be competitive. You know, that's the only way you're going to get the best product. That's all been put into us. That's not our natural state. And this is what I said from the beginning. I made it really clear. This is going to be confronting. People are not going to want to look into what they're bought into, because they've lived this life. Their ego is attached to it. They've done the living of it. They've put their time, energy, and labor into that life. So then the limit of understanding is that I can only get my needs for consideration, connection met in a team. That team has to fight another team, just like the army does. What's the difference? In Europe, the way that they used to recruit people to go fight in paramilitaries is from all the soccer hooligans, because they knew they were so jingoistic that they could get them now to actually start doing the actual murdering of others, because they already bought into the us and them so deeply. And then you think about what happens in England, with their soccer hooligans against their teams, the teams they play every day. Like these are frustrated people who are living a horrific existence, and the only way they can survive it is by hurting each other. Like no one looks into that. They think that's a wonderful thing. Oh, we're just going to, blow off some steam. What? By harming each other? But what do we do instead? Instead of looking at who the ones are that are creating the structure, so we do feel the pain and agony, we just think, well, the best thing to do is just take it out on our neighbor. That's a religion. That's thwarting back your consciousness. That's staying in the based instincts, in the carnal instinct of man. And these sports make sure that we stay in this carnal instinct of man as soon as there's winning or losing. That's us preventing our capacity to really connect with one another as a human family, as being part of all existence. That's that fragmenting mentality, that there's an us and a them, and that's all that it's done for. And once you go and participate in that, you've had that feeling of connection with those people you participated in with it, and so they're your brothers. But the other people aren't. For some reason, they're not human anymore. But you know what? We'll go shake hands at the end, and then they become human. But while we're on the field doing it, no, they're not. They deserve the punishment. They deserve the pain. They deserve to lose.
Would you argue that that is true for two tyre sellers in the same town?
Yes, because we live in an economic system that makes sure that you have to compete.
Well,
that's the limiting factor of mentality.
That argument doesn't stack up if I change it from tyre sellers to petrol stations.
Yes, it does, because any business has to compete with another one. That's the system we live under.
They don't compete.
They do on some level, because what's that whole thing about market share? They always talk about that, how to get more market share, who's going to be the better one who provides the better service, right? As opposed to why don't we all lift each other up, and provide a service. And then, it doesn't have to be about competing. There's enough for all of us to go around, because a fruit tree has more fruit than one individual can eat. So nature is full of abundance. There's a mind trick of scarcity at place here. That's what's actually, it's all about beliefs. If you ever want to make a good slave, get them to believe something that doesn't exist in reality and have them take it on as a truth, and then you will have a good slave. We don't have to have an economic system of where there's competition, And people will say one of the biggest lies on the planet. They'll go, "Oh, this isn't personal, it's business." That's one of the biggest lies on the planet. Of course it's personal, because you stand to gain from someone else's loss. So of course it's personal.
True. The 4 tenets of common law: no loss, no harm, no fraud, no violation of the peace. And
so if you think about that, what happened in those, you think about what happened with all those marks, someone who got hurt, there's people screaming and enjoying their pain and suffering. Right? Hang
on. Someone didn't get hurt in all those marks. I guarantee every one of those players got up and played on.
Yes, but in that moment when they got the knee to the back of the head, that hurt. Right? So why is that the object?
I don't think the knee to the back of the head is the object. The object is the ball and
why
the
is
air
that,
getting up high.
Yes, but why is that? But why is that the way that it can only be caught? Why is that even a thing that's allowed?
Well, it's not the only way that it can be caught, but that's the way the ball was coming at the time and had to be caught that way.
Why is that allowed to be caught like that? Why is that something that's a high aspiration?
Boring game without it.
Really? So it's boring to see people get along?
It's not about getting along.
See, what's happened there, Carl, is it's because it's the exhilaration of seeing someone flying high on someone's back. Like that's the only way you're going to experience exhilaration. Just like in a motorsport, is the only way to experience exhilaration if someone has a crash, right? So we're enjoying someone else's suffering.
Well, no, I would argue that motorsport can be enjoyed on a number of different levels without the crashing. But you're quite correct. Motorsport is dangerous. That's why it's printed on the back of every ticket sold. And yes, some people might come away from a racetrack after an event where there wasn't a crash feeling a bit let down. But by and large, that isn't the majority of people, particularly if the racing was good, close, fast, and respectful.
So I'm just going to read you this quote. Society pushes us since childhood to be in a chronic state of fight or flight. And what's that sport about? Rush to school, compete for good grades, compete in sports, achieve, perform. Our nervous system needs stillness, quiet, play, and creativity. We are human, not machines.
Yeah.
And we celebrate the opposite. That's a sickness.
Well, some of us do. Some of us don't play sport at all.
No, Carl. We do it on every level. It's in our economic system. It's in our schooling system. It's every level. It's competition. There is nowhere you can go where there isn't competition. If you want a job, you have to sell yourself. right? Think about that. You've got to compete with someone else. There isn't enough to go around. You've got to be the better man.
Oh, well, I must be because I don't play any sport.
This isn't a personal
Compassionate
attack, my friend.
trust, integrity, honesty, dignity, consideration, cooperation, contribution.
Yeah, so this is what I'm saying. Like, we practice compassion within our team, right? Just like an army will go no man left behind, but in order to have that experience, they must be killing another army. They can't have it they can't have it like we all just look after each other. And then you think about what happened, I think it was in the Second World War, where it was Christmas time and the soldiers just stopped shooting. They started playing soccer or some kind of sport and then exchanging cigarettes and pictures, etc.
Yeah.
That's our true divine nature. They didn't want to hurt each other. And then they were told if they didn't, they were going to get shot. So they went back into their trenches. I mean, that's our true divine nature right there. It's right in front of your face. We are not natural competitors. Yet the system makes sure that's all we can experience. If we want to experience elation, we have to be competing. If we want to experience exhilaration, we have to be competing. If we want to experience connection, we have to be competing. You know what I mean? There's no other way to experience those needs. It's channeled it for you. It's created the limits. So if you want to get that met, this is how you're going to do it. This is the clever mind trick. It's brilliant.
Reward. Sorry.
I was going to say the sheer fact that I'm getting all this pushback just shows how well it actually has worked.
Just as with punishment, reward originates from fear consciousness. Punishment is fear of misery and suffering. Reward is fear of missing out, FOMO. Reward is fear's silent assassination. It's the insidious incarnation of fear because it triggers a dopamine release that is too good to refuse. External reward switches one's inherent capacity to meet their own needs for safety, validation of purpose, and self-worth to dependency on an external source, most commonly authority figures.
So this is how we're trained to believe in government. It starts very early on. We're teaching our kids, that if you want to get your needs for acceptance met, if you want to get your needs for belonging met, if you want to get your needs for validation met, then it must be by someone else's definition. They will define it for you. And then you can only have self-worth. It's externally dependent. We're doing it from the beginning, and sport is all about that. If you want that adulation, right, you've got to be part of a team that beats another team. That's the only way you're going to get it. It does it constantly. And the economic system does it the same. Schooling system does it the same. Every single institution runs from that same idea. No difference. So then how are you going to know there's any other way to be? How? You're not going to be able to work it out by yourself. Your imagination's already shut down.
I played for 2 years in an under-16 football team that never won a game, never kicked more than about 6 points in a game. So I got very used to losing.
And did you enjoy it?
I don't remember it being the most painful thing of my life. Probably a bit disappointing, but...
So you got used to disappointment?
Well, I wanted to get better. I wanted to kick goals, not points. So My motivation was to try and get better.
Yes. So are we here to get better and beat each other? Is that what we're here for?
Well, no. I just told you my motivation was to get better, not to beat anyone, but to get better.
But what's the purpose? How do you measure getting better?
To get better.
How do you measure that?
By not being as bad as I was last time.
So how's that measured? Is it not by kicking goals?
It would be. If I kicked a goal, I would have got better.
Exactly. So what's the point of kicking a goal? What does that do?
It made me feel better.
But does that not add to a score? So it's a way to measure?
Not to a score that ever won.
The point is that if you can measure something,
no, the point is I went to footy training on a losing team for 2 years to get better.
At what?
Playing footy.
What's the purpose of that?
Well, it was sport at the time, exercise.
So to get better at exercise, the only way to do it is to kick a ball through some posts? There's no other way to get better at exercise?
I found it a lot more enjoyable than running around a track looking at nothing, or walking up a hill, or riding a bike around in circles, or any other form. At the time, I mean, I was, like I say, Last time I played AFL football, I was under 16. But I did it to get better, not to win. Winning never entered it.
So why was that the only way that you could get better? Like better at what? This is what's not making sense. Like better at what? The capacity to hold a ball and kick it? Because you don't need to go in a sport to do that. You can just kick it. So what did you want to get better at? Was it how you interacted with others, how you balked other people? Like what specifically did you want to get better at?
Every part of it, to be a better team member, a better player, a better person,
So
a better...
How is that a better person just because you can kick a ball better? Like
Well,
where the life values...
oranges for half time. I thought that made me pretty good.
Yeah. So what if your time was spent in actually educating other people how to live in accordance with their true divine nature instead of, hurting each other? What if that's a way to be better?
I'm sure that's a way to be better.
Well, does
But
that not
once
have
again,
inherent value to all of us?
But once again, I don't go from a shithouse football player or a shithouse teacher in your regard to a good one. I have to practice and get better.
Yes. And
that's
what I'm
not
asking
competition. That's not competition. That's me trying to get better, whether it be presenting like you are now or kicking a ball, playing squash, playing tennis. The objective for me, I guess, when I was playing under 16 football was not to get beaten by as much.
So what I'm trying to put on the table here is the objective of what that sport was set up for was to win or lose, was it not?
Well, yes.
Okay,
There
so
is a
you're
winner
getting
and
better
a loser.
you're getting better at not losing by as much. But at the end of the
I was
day,
getting better, but not. Yeah, I was getting better. Yeah,
yes,
you're right.
At the end of the day, somebody's a winner and somebody's a loser. So how is that getting?
And if you are a person, I suppose, who places great stakes on that, and I clearly am not, then I suppose that could be a motivating factor. But I'm not one of those people, and I'm not the only one who's not like that.
So why engage in something that you don't even care about? That just doesn't make sense. If you don't care about winning, why engage in it? That's a contradiction.
There's a lot of things I engage in that I don't care about, or a lot of things that I start engaging in and discover later down the track that I don't care about, but I still keep engaging with them. So explain that to me.
I can't really get into that specific nature of why
Let's get on to
do that.
because I'm not going to be here till 11 o'clock tonight. Let's get on to the next thing. We've got another share.
You can catch this card with your head. You can buy anything you want. Change your hand. 1, 2.
So have a look at that, right? So he said to him, if you can catch this card with your head, you can buy anything you want. So he wasn't thinking about how he was going to get sucked in. He was thinking about what he wanted, right? So there's the reward. Straight away, he's not even thinking, right? So straight away, he's not even considered the consequences of what he's about to do. The parents knew that, right? They set him up. So they're enjoying his suffering.
Yes.
His own parents. Right?
Yes.
This is what reward does. Like there's a sickness here that we do that to each other. That was a beautiful demonstration, right? If you looked at his face, he wasn't laughing. He was in pain.
Oh, yes. Yeah, headbutting the door like that, I think, would certainly...
But that's what his parents set up. Why? Why would they do that to
their
child?
Don't. Yeah, practical joke. I've recently experienced one of those. It didn't go down very well.
So this is the disconnect, right? If we're going to do this to our own children, then why are we complaining about people lining their kids up to get jabbed? I mean, it's no different.
Yeah, true. Competitive sport built from the belief that life-saving needs can only be met within the confines of the gang one belongs to through the manufactured perception that there exists an enemy gang that seeks to violate the sacred bonds of the opposing gang. Therefore, setting up the belief that the only dynamic by which familial bonds can exist is through the existence of opposing gangs. To get needs for community and connection met, one needs to circumscribe a protective barrier filled with my people, aka gang, club anthems, reinforce the special familial bonds unique to each gang. Now, before you start associating that to footballers, Why don't you associate that to Lions clubs, Apex, and Rotary clubs?
I don't have a preference to who you're associated with because it's all come from the same mentality. So I really don't care.
Okay. Explain it to me in that context then.
It's all done the same way. Well, what are they? What's a Lions club? It's a gang. You know,
it's a gang that goes out and helps the community.
Yes, but have you seen what's behind that? What systems and structures they run? Who's really pushing all that? You might find it's a little different to what you think. So they have an ulterior motive, those places, but you don't see that. You only see the outreach part, the part they want you to see. But you don't know what's underlying all of that. And, we're in a place now, Carl, where everything's up for investigation. Like if we can't look into every aspect of how we've become good slaves, then we're not going to learn a thing. And this is what's on offer.
I agree, 100%.
So this is about really looking into what I said, self-respect, the places that we hide, our contradictions, those crevices that we hide them in, right? This is what I started off saying, and we're going to do it. And here we are. We're doing it, right? So you can choose any gang. I don't care what you call it. They're all gangs.
I've chosen 3. I haven't got to engage on that, so let's keep moving. Self-contradictory rules. Society is our extended mind and body, yet the very society from which the individual is inseparable is using its whole irresistible force to persuade the individual that he is indeed separate. Society, as we know it, is therefore playing a game with self-contradictory rules.
So I'm pretty sure that's self-explanatory. Everything been showing so far shows the contradiction, that you can only get your needs for connection met if you are in a gang, and they have to have an opposing gang in order for you to be motivated enough to cooperate with one another. That's what sport asks you to do. You cooperate with one another so you can beat the other team. You can't do it. You can't get your needs cooperation met at all. You can't get your needs for community met unless there's something to oppose. But that's what it's reinforcing. So that's a self-contradictory rule.
Okay, societal values: sharing, connection, choice, integrity, dignity, security, trust, honour, and inclusivity. Whereas sporting values: opposition, adversary, and competition, criticism, judgment, self-righteousness, enemies, dehumanization, hostility, aggression, enjoyment of violence.
That's what you get from sport, whether you want to admit it or not. It's there in your face. So it's up to how many people want to look at it and really see it.
Confusion, a state of internal anarchy where the mind is ruled by fear and ignorance, a state of opposition within one's own consciousness by being torn apart from within in such a way that 3 aspects of consciousness, thoughts, emotions, and actions, are in perpetual contradiction to each other.
So if you think about it, right, if you belong to a team, right, and your objective is to beat the other team, you think about how they talk about it. What are we going to do? We're going to tear them down. We're going to rip them up. You hear that pep talk. This is that. In order to unify as a force, it has to be that there's an opposing team that we've got to destroy to do it. Like that's thoughts, actions, and emotions, because they're living sentient beings on the other team. So why do you want to do that to each other? Like, does that not keep us down? If you want to keep a society down, you get them to believe that violence is the way it's got to be done and to enjoy it and actually celebrate it. So we have holidays for sports that hurt each other. Like, you got to think about how far that's reached into people's consciousness, and they're not going to want to look at it because they've invested their whole life into it. And why would they want to challenge that? This is the real hard work. Yet this is why we're down where we are.
What holidays do we have? What holidays do we have for sport where people can hurt each other?
What do they do for the AFL? Don't they have a holiday just before they have the in Melbourne? Don't they have it just before they have the grand final?
Well, they're not having a football match to celebrate Anzac Day. Anzac Day is Anzac Day. They happen to put a football match on it.
No, I'm talking about the AFL grand final. I'm sure they have a holiday for it.
You don't. It's on a Saturday. It's not a public
holiday. Yes, but they had one this year.
Oh, well, it is Dan's land. He can do whatever he likes. Yeah, never had a public holiday for it when I was a kid, put it that way. Menticide. Menticide, a systematic and intentional undermining of a person's conscious mind. It's brainwashing. Hierarchy domination structures creates deceptive yet effective means by which one gets their life-serving needs met in order to initiate death of the imagination. We are endowed with imagination as a means to keep progressing and moving forward. So in order to stifle the natural evolutionary process, The mind's full potential must be subdued by stealth.
So if you think about it, right, what does sport do, right? You get your needs for what I just said before. You know, you want community, connection, trust. You've got to trust your team member, you know, honor, dignity, all these things, but it can only be within the confines of that team, right? So, and then your brain just stops thinking, well, there's no other way to get, you start going, well, there's no other way to get done. It's not like we can cooperate with someone else, you know, who's not one of us. So then they need to be defeated in order for us to be able to have those needs met. Like, you got to really think about that. Yet we all have the same needs. So why would we want to prevent each other from getting it? You know, this is war. We've been in war, perpetual war, for thousands of years. And how much has evolved since the days of the Colosseum? You know, it's just not lions and animals and chariots. We're still hurting each other and enjoying it. There's no difference. It's just a different way that it's done. So how much have we really progressed here? We've stagnated. We're still enjoying violence. You know, as soon as someone thinks their footy's going to be turned off, they lose their minds. Right? When their beer and footy's gone, that's it. They can't handle life. It's the only thing they've got. Like, how tragic is that?
I would agree that's very true in Victoria. But
there's a lot of people who would suffer if that wasn't available to them. A lot.
Oh, yeah. Yep, don't doubt it. All right. Another video.
Rick.
What does that mean?
To take something in.
Okay, excellent. To absorb. Anyone?
Everywhere, all the time.
So what is ubiquitous assimilation?
Always absorbing everything everywhere all the time.
Well done, George. How are you to imagine anything if the images are always provided for you? Who here read 1984 last year? Good. Anyone? Meredith?
Having two opposing beliefs at once, believing that both are true.
Deliberately believe in lies while knowing they're false. Examples of this in everyday life. Oh, I need to be pretty to be happy. I need surgery to be pretty. I need to be thin, famous, fashionable. Our young men today are being told that women are whores, bitches, things to be screwed, beaten, shit on, shamed. This is a marketing holocaust. 24 hours a day, for the rest of our lives, the powers that be are hard at work, dumbing us to death. So, to defend ourselves and fight against assimilating this dullness into our thought processes, we must learn to read, to stimulate our own imaginations, to cultivate our own consciousness, our own belief systems. We all need these skills to defend, to preserve our own minds.
So that's from a movie. I think it's called Disassociation. I can't remember. Really brilliant movie, guys. It speaks about how we're controlled. Like, we're always in doublethink. We're always in contradiction. We're not even aware. So people who are still struggling to understand how this is connected to the 1215 MC, the 1215 MC is man's best interpretation of how to live in peace and harmony, right? By no loss, no harm. Yet we are in contradiction to it with the structures we've set up. So if we actually want to live in peace and harmony, we've got to start looking at all the institutions we've set up and what they're based on. Are they in breach of a loss? Are they in breach of harm? Are they in breach of the peace, right? Is there a fraud in the way it's all set up? Is there a mind trick there? I'm trying to get you guys to see past what's just the right in front of you. Look deeper, guys, because this is a connection to natural law. And the laws of nature are that we all need our dignity preserved, not some, but all. Then we can have peace, right? There's a breach of the peace as soon as somebody loses and somebody wins. There's no such thing as keeping peace when that happens. It's not possible. So if you're not understanding the link, I'm going to explain it to you in black and white. That's why we're doing it this way, because you've got to see how you are participating in your own slavery. It's critical to understand that. If you cannot see that, you're going to keep perpetuating it. And then you're going to be blaming someone else. And you're not taking full responsibility for how you've accepted the lie, that you've swallowed the contradiction. It can't happen from someone else. You need to do the work.
Okay. Competitive sport and fear. Utilizes reward, that's a fear of missing out, to trigger enemy images of other living sentient beings with the same needs, hence the belief that others deserve to suffer, which perpetuates ideas that superior and inferior are inherent in nature, promotes the belief that we are here to be better and better, i.e. the better team won on the day.
So I think that's really self-explanatory. Like, we're sentient beings, you know, and how do we connect with one another? When we make an identification. And how do we do that? Well, they're like us, not them. They're not like us. So we get to dehumanize them. But the ones who are like us, yes, they're part of our group. This is all part of the slow degenerative effect on how we become each other's enemies. And it's perpetuated very early. So, you know, and sport is the way it's done really beautifully. And you pick any sport you like, even chess. Like, whatever you want, you might see it's passive, but it's always about a winner and a loser. And your energy is about defeating somebody.
Too tired. Here we go.
Encourage you not to not me anything. That's me too. And then there's our family.
Carl, you might need to turn the mic off.
Or then there's our community. Or then there's like my people, my tribes. And I'm going to go to bat for them versus them. Those other people over there, those bad ones. This is another consciousness that I think we need to evolve out of. The good people versus the bad people. What nonsense is this? It's nonsense. We are not on this planet to become better and better people and to be little projects to become compliant with cultural systems that do not work for our global community. That is not, in my opinion, the purpose of your life. The purpose of your life is to come alive. The purpose of your life is to find out who you really are and to become part of the human community. To recognize your shared humanity with other humans on this planet, and to even extend beyond that, your shared fate with life on this planet. And to begin thinking about community in a more expansive way than us versus them in little siloed echo chamber groups where we can feel comfortable and self-righteous, or helpless and terrified and fearful.
So she just says it beautifully. I don't know if I could do it better than what she just said. You know, how are we ever going to get into that space where we're really understanding our shared fate with all life on this planet while we still participate in competition? How is that possible?
Certainly a lot to ponder.
Like I said, Carl, there's a lot more coming.
I'm going to look forward to lesson number 20. Let's hope it doesn't take 3 weeks to get to.
Yes, that would have been wonderful. You did it earlier.
It would be wonderful. You're 100% right. All right, lesson 20 next Monday night. I don't know where I'm going to be for it, but next Monday night, lesson number 20. Appreciate it, Fitz.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. I'm hoping there was something of value there. The resistance was perfect because it's part of the process. So you need to resist. It's an authentic experience. And at the end of it, if you come to something that you didn't have when you started, then it's worth it.
Indeed. You have yourself a good week, my friend.
Yeah, likewise, my friend. Good night, everybody.
See you, folks.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's ride!